Welcome, welcome. Been doing some thinking, and I'm really excited for what I'm about to talk about. So let's go. So I made this post. Last night I was realizing, let's just go over to. Oh, am I? There it is. Oh yeah, I was taking shots of it. Okay. Last night I realized that there was a current, the main current coming through this region, through here. This main current, which went down into South America, branched off here. And then this current coming out here underneath North America runs into resistance of probably another current coming from like India region maybe. But it then branches off this way and also this way, but mostly this way. So it goes up. Mind you, I've been realizing like this region over the way it curves, it wasn't always like that. It was actually initially this segment was over here, but even more so initially it was all just generally over further, just more straight, like a straight line down here. And I believe if we like the way this is here, this current, it's kind of like over here in a way where like I feel like it maybe was because of the way it's so detectable, it was probably producing large eddies breaking bonds between layers, and essentially this region kind of like disintegrated some of the support in this region right to here. So like because this was occurring adjacent, these like novas were just kind of novaing around the side at some point. And so essentially it was just separating the newly forming ocean floor from the newly forming continental crust being accreted and making the continental crust at the boundary less supported, whereas once it stops novaing, it goes a little more like cleanly in this region right here. And so what I'm realizing is this is caused by the support of this current, which is just flowing along the very edge, maybe initially along the very edge, where this current coming through here just passes it and then goes out along past it. So the current coming through here is initially very close to the boundary, and then over time this current starts to bow it out further, so it kind of like has space to flow between and sort of begins as the earth expands, begins to like move the position of that current off of the coastline, and then still have eddies up here because the current was being fed from up here. So as it died off, it wasn't really being fed as much down in lower regions. Maybe something of that nature. Okay. But generally speaking, it was producing a support structure here, producing this boundary, especially where it was able to just stably and flow in a laminar way. Laminar flow, turbulent flow because of cross currents, and just like this current coming from down here in some way beginning to like cross over it, because essentially it's going straight up, but then momentum carries it, some of the current, like past this current's little threading current. So it goes along this wall, along here, and maybe the inverse is happening where this current is just threading like a tiny thread through to the other side to have like a basically each side has a large chunk of one direction and a tiny chunk of the other at the boundary and inverse. Maybe that kind of would make sense, but although maybe not necessarily. Maybe not necessarily detectably even, or but anyway, doesn't. Besides the point. Generally speaking, though, this current goes down here and begins to open up space along the way by interacting with the opposing current. So mind you, in this region, the opposing current is just generally going this way. I believe actually like exactly this way, because it's generally straight at the time, this coastline. It's just the earth has expanded and the pressures pushing on the still malleable earth like reshaped it into this bow with like a... I talked about this. I don't want to get caught up on things too much that I talked about and lose track on the new things I want to talk about. It looks like, generally speaking, the current was passing through here, hitting resistance, going up at a 90-degree angle, generally speaking, and then meeting resistance from this crossing current, which then separated the crossing current maybe around here. Like, it came through like here. The current coming up this way was maybe like this wide. And so it went through and it just caused like a little chunk of the upper current to just divide off. But that current kept getting fed and fed, so then it just continues, but it just meets some sort of resistance moving forward in the current that's generally still maybe further wide, even wider than that, because this really probably goes back here, and I'm not really accounting for that in what I'm just saying right there. But essentially it meets enough resistance going straight forward where for some reason it's like, or maybe it just jumps, where the real thing is that it was always forward and these side things are just from like sudden abrupt events like nova types. But I feel like sorry for not knowing what I'm talking about sometimes, but for sure this is generally a nova center here, smaller ones, and then this is one, and this is a larger one, so they start getting progressively larger down here, progressively larger. So this is what I really wanted to talk about, is what I'm about to talk about and look into. So like this is, so we can tell just based on this here that they were at some point they were at this angle here, and then this region, or this region, sorry, right here was right here. So this was Papua New Guinea, which I made these. Papua New Guinea, I put it next to it to demonstrate it really does match up pretty well. Here's, because I drew over it, it's a little less distinct to see the feature, but there's one of the features, there's one of the features, and there's it matching up. I did have to just like change the pixels of this to just make it match, but I have previously in one of the videos actually measured it so it does match distance wise here. So this is actually accurate in terms of like dimensionally. It's not inappropriate to say that this is here, this is here, this is here. Like that's how it was. Is this region was generally attached to here. This region was generally attached to here, which bubbled. The divide has created a bubble here. This region was generally attached here, and the divide created a bubble, which maybe even played into that shape. It almost looks like it does show the current cutting this way, pushing upward into here. Like at this point, that that I was mentioning. Not I was thinking here it crossed over, but maybe also it just has a crossover thread. Right here. Because the nova is probably through here and then like moves out this way. Like right here to right here. And then turns, I guess, a little bit as the Earth expands. So this side is more this way. But so let's keep going. This current, generally speaking, I believe what happens is it can't like break through this region physically and create like a severing of Papua New Guinea. Like it creates a current of energy that just propagates underneath it, creating like hot venting, magma venting, and just creates this platonic complex. And here, this looks kind of like a side of a shallogram to a degree. And then even it starts to go out of sync. Like here, it's kind of there's pretty much two currents, one here, one like this, one going up, down, and crossing around here, and one going generally across at the bottom and down, or maybe across there even, splitting off in some way there, where it just like the energy of the currents. So in essence, there's a current going through here that starts to, that really is over here. From here to here. So let's go back here. Current going through from this position where we visibly see on the ocean floor evidence of this event. It then passes through a region where there isn't evidence, but the evidence is instead on the surface where the current begins to destabilize. Like two waves are flowing, like there's and then they begin to open up a little bit here, but then they really open up here. Probably is what happened. Is it's those same two waves separating. Let's go back there because I think I was kind of thinking that a little bit initially, that this one going across here just goes up and opens, where this one going up, down, or wait, up, down, up. Okay, yeah, up, down, up. That one. And then just generally across, maybe deflects here and bends down. Yeah, that makes more sense. That makes more sense. So one goes up, down, up, and kind of does like even like a slingshot thing with the energy, maybe, where it causes this ripple through here. Because it's meeting resistance. It's essentially over here, so it causes, maybe this even is reflective of that ripple. Here, like where that energy went, like that's the negative to this positive. Yeah. But because it met the resistance of counter pressure, it just kind of did this instead of just continuous. Like the current could have just kind of flung up this way, like kind of over here, how it just continues to just go up through here and up through. Pardon me. But so that reliably shows to us though that whether or not I've like pinpointed exactly, like this is Papua New Guinea. We can hinge Papua New Guinea here. Let's just measure it from here to here. 865 miles. So from maybe here to maybe here, that is way longer. Why did I measure these to be similar? Okay, that's so maybe from here to here. I'll measure to here, maybe like there. That's probably more the Nova Center than this one. Maybe this is like a secondary one. Like it did it up, it did it here. And then here. So it does fit. It was like 300 miles off. What did I do? Okay, secondary one, secondary one. First one, second one. Let's measure from there to there and see if this is more like 1100. Nice. Nice. Okay. Nice. I wonder if this is indicative of something then. It really looks like the current is right there that essentially flowed along this boundary. Right along the inside of this. Inside of it, inside of it, inside of it, inside of it. And then out into the ocean as it opened the ocean. As the ocean was opened. And then it looks like it. But it initially is here, and then it begins to trail. That's the reality. It's not like it comes out here and like flows this way. It actually starts over here when the segment is over here in general. And then this nova's outward, create like pushing this segment physically over, so then it moves over. But that's really right here-ish. We can even see the curvature as it turned, leaving a trail behind it because it's physically rotating upward. And then the currents flowing out leave just it's like a, I don't know, like if you have a comb and you comb through sand or something, I don't know. But like the comb has a feed of sand behind it that just leaves a trail of sand. Like that sand's not previously there. It's just depositing sand as the cone moves. Something of that nature, but the cone turns and leaves behind like trails of high regions and low regions where like currents were really flowing. So also if there's like water flowing along the edge of the container where the comb is moving in, kind of thing, some current that's really more intense than the rest to create a differential. Where there's current the whole place, it's just the differential creates and the is created by the current difference. Okay, so then it's leaving behind a trail here. Let's see what maybe is like this distance away from here, 235 miles. Is there something of interest like 235 miles from the center-ish of here to like, this even looks like it trapped a portion of something from over there. What if I go to that? Okay, that's too far. 230, maybe just to this boundary right there. I mean, depending on where exactly I pick as the center of this, maybe if I just measure generally across, if it's like under 500, that would be maybe a sign. No, no, no. Maybe more like directly out to this here, where there's also some sort of feature, not far enough. It's about where this is. We were finding that there's a positive to the negative, right? To this negative. Maybe this is a negative to a positive of some sort with like, if we'd have to see more features like this. Pretty much it begins to pop nodes along the boundary here. And there's certainly like there's spreading going on in this region where all of this here is just like newly accreted pretty much. It's kind of formed here, maybe, I'm not sure. Maybe like straight across here. And then up like this. I guess pretty much to here, but this just widened. So this was more just here probably. Just generally, maybe even generally filling up to here. Then as it was pushed across by a current, was it pushed? It's kind of left behind, maybe. This current's flowing through. Maybe it was pushed across in a way. Like the current cutting across from under Mexico begins to flow through here at some stage. I'm getting somewhere, I swear. There's something I haven't talked about that I wanted to talk about still. It does look like this kind of just formed adjacent and separated by a current flowing in. Generally this current that was flowing in up this way. In. But up between and then like out here, I guess, was maybe where this failed continent formed. New Zealandia, I think it was called. Zealandia. Failed continent because essentially it was forming just like the west coast of North America, where there was a current flowing, just accreting new material, but it just didn't accrete enough, or otherwise it didn't seal enough to like have newly inflowing currents prevent the collapse of its roof, and the roof collapsed. And it seems that also probably it must have came through this way, generally speaking, because while it was over here like deflecting generally off of the mass of Australia's body, that then couldn't flow the current through anymore and just kind of produced like a wave thing here against, because essentially over here the current was probably flowing into South America, because this is real straight, So this region is forming here, generally, like between South America and Australia. Australia goes down to here from Papua New Guinea, from here to here. So that's all, like, essentially this position was here at some point. Australia's corner was here at some point. And this was kind of more this way, I guess. This was generally turned. I wonder if I can get pre-cut, like, there's got to be someone who's just pre-cut the continents into, like, dimensionally sound shapes that I can arrange well enough to kind of talk about the things I'm saying. Because essentially, this point, we can say with a high degree of certainty that this region was specifically right here. We can say that Papua New Guinea was specifically there, and that was even specifically here. So even we notice this, like, change in the angle. It's not just going straight across like Papua New Guinea. It begins to actually go downward because it's going along a smaller globe surface. Even though it's going straight here in appearance. Straight, straight, straight. So that then it causes Australia's southeast corner to break free. But then this is just physically wide. In the meantime, it's just physically widening the space over here until this ripple ripples again down here and here, which must be like here, like related to the collapsing of like this. Maybe it kind of looks like a hexagon structure there and maybe there, like the collapsing of the failed continent. That kind of makes sense, that it's just forming continents, and then somewhere in the process it's kind of running out of steam as it's expanding, and then the failed, like the final, like when the rapid supernova begins is when it can no longer form continents, and so it just, like, the energy gets in here and collapses, breaks this apart, and then the continents are all freely able to move, and then it enters the rapid supernova phase, where it just fills in the gaps between the polygonal boundaries. Like here, it begins to, like, instead of cutting through the polygons and creating new polygons like through here, it stops doing that and fully just comes out of the, or mostly, almost entirely, comes out of just the boundaries, because the polygons have stabilized enough where they don't really provide the same points of optimal outflow that they did, and so then the current begins to truly flow only out of the cracks of the oceanic crust, which is really when, isn't it crazy? The average age of the oceanic crust is approximately just after the rapid supernova. So it's almost like just a little bit more of the rapid supernova phase of expansion of the Earth was formed in oceanic crust. Like, there's just a little bit more oceanic crust after the Earth started to rapidly supernova than before. It's interesting. Which is why it's average age. Mean age? mean age. So mostly then it begins to flow through here, which is, and through here, and through here, and through here, through here. So let's kind of look at this a little bit. This is the current that's cutting across the broad current, like the narrow current. I would say it's not just any current. Now that I'm thinking about it, it's almost like I've been kind of generally talking about all these currents. How there's this teal current. There's one current that broadens out and fans. And then essentially goes under all of North America. I'm not sure if this one generally. This green one. But then there's another current that appears to like narrow, and maybe it like continuously flows in the current, like where there's like a leading current that's wrapped around more than once, like gone through the totality of the currents, where essentially, let me maybe scroll out with this mouse and then follow the current. So from here, the mantle puncture hole, one current goes that way and fans out and produces a backstop, like we talked about in the last video-ish or so, where Hawaii has this, which fans out on one side and then shoots a beam on the other side that physically is in the terrain. This type of shape, this type of thing going on, this is what the Earth did, where it had like a backstop and then a current that basically was flowing in the other direction this way, that narrows over here. Narrows, generally speaking. Maybe I can get some of my pictures up. What's this? Here it widens, but it's also like has a cross current. But down in this region, this is a good example. It narrows this much. Like this is how focused of a beam it becomes, that it's able to puncture a tiny hole like that, and also create like here's a location where it was essentially drilling through here. The focus beam that was generally this current, but maybe there's another current along the boundary that didn't. Maybe it was the boundary current that's coming up from here that caused those. I've kind of been thinking it was actually within the boundary, riding along the edge of the boundary here. But maybe not. And then just kind of came out the end of underneath here, came out this way, but like with a current into the ocean that just ran into the sides of the continents and began to like drill into them to create anomalies like this one. But maybe it's on the outside, flowing along the outside. Essentially, there's a focus current. My thoughts are, generally speaking, is that the current maybe went around here and also went around here. Like there's some current within here that just stays like right inside here, just really getting finer and finer threaded, but more and more like momentum and energy, and just really building a current around this like terminal of the earth that formed. And then, like, as that current divides away from this, specifically down this way, like, which is where it's generally going, all the current like hugging this is generally going down here. So any current that's like really hugging this and then breaks off from it is gonna especially go down here. Maybe, although maybe it would. It seems reasonable that it would go down the path here, but then, generally speaking, it seems to pass over the other current just right through because it's strong enough. Like that leading current passes the other current and essentially begins to carve a pathway through. And then in locations like here where it can't really do it as well, like this kind of looks like one, but like between these, it's not really carving through. Like it stops carving through, and so it's almost just starts creating a bunch of novas, which is probably why this is so like ripply and rough terrain versus up here. Like it's certainly not just flat, but it's way less intricate, although this looks real interesting. Like a nova center here happened, like the energy got to a very end point and it just fed into here and fed into here and fed into here, creating more and more just novas. That, but because it wasn't able to like destabilize outwardly, it just kept creating those novas, but then it started to produce like jets outward that then carved through here enough where finally the current could go through it completely and then continue to go in the direction of its momentum that it was propagating. So it just like quickly went through there. Once this like directed focused region was able to produce jets outward, and then this one seemingly maybe got caught in the current. Maybe it even like produced jets that produced like quasars equivalents, which is maybe why there's so many mounds here and so many mounds kind of in this direction. I don't know. And then it moved over, went down this way, but and probably just like it looks like it got caught up in certain locations like here, generally speaking, as it propagated, and just novaed and novaed and novaed, just creating space for the current to continue to flow through, essentially. And then as it does, it then reaches a point where it meets a bunch of resistance again, but I guess it just quickly deflected this time. It seems like it just was able to just deflect. I don't know why. Almost like like this stage, like maybe right here is like the high peak of the general, like, because it's almost like a tube of current, so somewhere in the middle of the tube is like a slightly elevated portion that maybe once this like current was able to get over top it was much more easily able to just continue over to some other place to move forward, so that essentially once it met resistance here, it quickly moved over here and quickly moved over here for some reason, just because of the elevations, something of that nature. And then it continued, but it just like got really caught up here and just essentially like these appear to be wider right down here, like this region that where nova centers are, just creating space. is notably wider right here, and even wider still right as it approaches the boundary, and then it like fans out even maybe, where that's really not the same as up here. There's really nothing of that degree, maybe like this, but it's sideways through it, cutting across it. So it's not really novaing in the same way. Because here it's almost just sitting there as like a counter current, just pushing against and just creating novas, like by the counter current pushing against it, just pushing boundaries out. Creating like the current coming through gets, it almost is like the current coming through gets like dispersed, its effects widen, like because it just keeps creating these like ripples outward, its effects start to ripple outward, so that the currents like flow almost like is more outward, like in to a point where it looks like a pen or a pencil, like it, where it novas, it comes almost to a point where the entirety of the point is the lead of the pencil kind of thing. And then, so like the current was stuck here and just creating more widening, just destabilizing this so that the current could just flow through the entirety of it. But then it just kind of got redirected, like this region was stable enough where the current couldn't get into it, so it got kind of redirected back this way, where it just rejoined the current, almost like teleporting through a portal, rejoining the current over here. Like it was all this current kind of like separated out into this like huge lake type region because of the novas that were just creating ripples out for the current to flow through. And then it just narrows in again. And then suddenly we're over here. Not even here. It's crazy. There's no, maybe that. There's very little evidence, if any, of like a nova center here. Maybe this. I'm reaching though. I just feel like it's bonded. It was bonded to this reliably, and it was bonded to this reliably. Then it propagates through. So I'm thinking like when it gets here, it starts to really hit resistance. Probably a main current. Let's see. Because we've kind of figured there's a current generally coming across like here. Somewhere, was it here? I think it was actually from up here. One of these currents. Maybe let's see if it's this current specifically. There's a current that goes out this way that we've been following, but there's another one that goes right here. Right here, right here. Up this way, I believe, like through here or here, one of those. And generally across, I believe that current interacts with this region and plays into Iceland, so it's probably here. Across here, generally, maybe. One of these at that point, maybe one or both of these. But then they're generally, one of them comes out here. Probably this one. Looks like this. Yeah, there it is. Okay. It's cutting across here exactly. Which is right at the like Yellowstone, by the way. Cutting across there. And then out into the Pacific. where it's then just threading through here. Wait, is that the same location or is that this one? That's this one. That's this one. So there must be another one up here too. Okay, here we go. It looks like we can see that one too. Here's that line. And then a bunch of novas centered on this path this way. Which maybe was fed here. Which then, before this moved, was actually probably this boundary-ish. I don't know. Which was maybe over here. Like this region of this stream was feeding maybe to the boundary there. I don't know. Somehow there's one coming through here, it looks like. Or here. Here too, right there, looks like. But here, that actually crosses. Okay, that makes sense because it crosses Hudson Bay. So there's probably a strong current that's going. That makes sense. It's going by that region because it crosses through. Or there it is. Right through here. Crosses through Hudson Bay. Which then probably played into like backstopping this by like novas here. Almost looks like a yin yang here in this position right here. Because it probably is. But essentially that current, however exactly it flows in. Looks like maybe here flows in through here and then kind of appears more straight, but essentially, and even maybe flows to this boundary, like it's a wide current flowing out, producing like a mound. Maybe it never bends. I've been saying it bends here, but maybe it doesn't. Because that is kind of weird. Like, it probably does, but it probably also is doing that thing where it's kind of producing like a shallogram features. Like this. But like, essentially the current's coming out this way. Generally speaking, just straight out. But not like at this boundary. At this boundary running into resistance and running along it. I mean, I guess to a degree, but it's also like there's more of these the whole way, so they're feeding into those, so it may not even need to be flowing up the coast. I mean, it certainly does to a degree. There's certainly a current going there. Now that the more I think about it, there's certainly a current going there. Just because of over here and other reasons generally going that way. Probably because it's like a running downhill away from some ammonite feature. I don't know. But in essence, like it looks like it gets kind of stuck at that boundary and starts to instead just put a current along it, increasing this current here because this is a like real thin seamount that just flows out. Real thin, just flows on out. Because this current is generally pushing against it. This narrow one that's flowing this way is generally pushing against it. And then it's producing as the Earth expands, a very straight boundary because it must have been pushing against it all the way over here, even all the way over here. This is probably all forming while this current's flowing through over here. Yeah. Yeah. This stuff was forming adjacent by the current, probably. Although if this stuff has a, yeah, it's got a current going upward. It's got a current going this way apparently, and it's also got a current. I've linked this stuff more to another current also. This here certainly is tied to a current coming generally across from Asia, across this way, that goes through here and begins to interact with this current and like create ripples up into it. So essentially that current's coming up that way and interacting with that current, creating ripples through it. And producing like a mini Mariana Trench type feature by its cross current. So maybe there's a current pushing more this way to the right that's actually fed from more over here. This is constantly evolving until it just is not true. Or it's true. It's just true. It's just I'm not, like, it's generally true. I'm just not certain on the precise things. Also, I wanted to point this out. I was saying this is like a negative, or this is like a positive, and this is like a negative over. I was saying over here, but then I realized, wait, this volcano that I was talking about recently is like there's a plate underneath it, that brought water, and like this is a nova center where it dispersed like a positive and then a equal opposite negative. It's almost like it took the ocean that was forming and just shoved it underneath it as like a negative to it to counterbalance this in some way. How would that work? Yeah, to counterbalance it, because essentially, like it's centered on this region, and essentially this over here. If there was only just like the material that was previously here, it would just slope downward. But then because it blew out the material and deposited it underneath this side, it just like wedges it so that it can support the weight and not like be at a lower elevation stably. At this, it's stably formed this way then because of that type of thing going on where it provided a support structure. But in so doing, it also brought water like focusedly to the counterpoint here, creating this volcano. I haven't even got to what I want to talk about, but this is definitely interesting over here. That the concept that this current coming, this narrow current that's really opening the earth, is really involved in creating like a straight line here. Like it's carving down a straight line here, and then when it gets to here, it's really a straight line as it's doing this. It just moves over in a way where it like makes it look like it wasn't. I don't. But then as it goes through here, it's providing this boundary here. So Hawaii was forming like in this region. It's like the nova here was definitely related to Hawaii. And then the nova here, let's see if there's like this bend maybe. No. Not sure where the bend is. Maybe this even is a bend. This is kind of like a abrupt change. Let's see. Let's see what that measures at, like around there. So this is around 900. Where it goes up, that's probably a good indicator right there to where it goes down right there. 918. Pretty much? Okay. Okay. And then there's like a change here. Where it goes up. So I measured like here to maybe here-ish. 260. So from here, thinking like to this location. $340. Before I get caught up on things I haven't really looked into, let's talk about some things I haven't really looked into. Okay. I don't want to not talk about this because essentially this current goes through here, somehow energetically gets through here, probably by actually propagating through, maybe even in somewhere it's reflective of it. Unclear where exactly, but generally rippling through at the minimum. At the minimum, it causes ripples, physical waves, like a tidal wave, where then like the bonds between the still malleable forming overlay crust is then more able to just be ripped. And over here it rips, and in so doing, it allows the energy of location to especially just propagate up through and just kind of bubbles and boils in this region. But in so doing, it begins to essentially that current still coming through. If it was enough current, it could just stop there, but there's just so much current that it just bubbles and bubbles and bubbles and bubbles, rippling tidal wave until this over here severs, and then this region is then caused to do the same thing, where it then causes the adjacent region of Papua New Guinea there to ripple and sever even more, which then goes down along the eastern coast of Australia, between Australia and Zealandia as it's forming in this region. Like Zealandia is probably forming physically as this moves out over here. And then when the current goes through Zealandia, it reaches over here and causes a nova, maybe? I feel like maybe that's where that nova is, because I haven't really found it exactly. I kind of just assumed it. Wait, okay, this one is the second one. I kind of assumed it was down there. But we actually see a hexagon here. 1934. From this one to about here, maybe. What's 19? I mean, it's generally in it. Let's do it again. This one, like the center of it is maybe here. It's really not hexagonal. This is hexagonal. So I guess this current comes through, rides along a wall, continues straight. The portion going more through generally goes more through generally. Maybe the portion like really running into resistance over here bounces off more. And somehow is able to get over here, I don't know. To kind of bubble out that region. Probably that. And it's just like destabilizes and then it bubbles like in the same way. It's like and then kind of comes through here. Maybe a bubble type thing. Where can we find that? There's certainly a Nova Center there. Just look at that. Where is that? There it is. There must be cross currents here, just in the same way as up here. It physically fans out in all directions over here, where there's a current coming across here. Maybe one across here that just like meets here and really produces this eddy. Like it's not just like randomly drilling in, it's actually an eddy being created by a cross current at that location, and at that location there's a current flowing out. Current flowing out, current flowing out. Let's look around the world. All around the world. All around the world. Like this has it from so essentially the bulk flow is going across here, but a counter current is going across here. Maybe that's what this is a counter current. That then left behind a trail. So many amendments to what I'm thinking. Okay, so generally though, this definitely causes these things to just nova. And then down here though, it causes like a small nova and a small nova, I noticed. that then like kind of just have half of it. But it's really big, like generally speaking. Like it seems the feature just seems to go maybe over here, but for sure, like up here as if it's only half, and that the other half of it is kind of here. It's almost like this was energetically related to this, and then this space opened. Essentially, like a current, generally speaking, is flowing down here. Let's go to this. Where? Flowing this way and widening this. This may just be this narrow current coming through and widening. Then it, at some point around here, let's look at some more southern hemisphere. This is 400 million. 325. So this is early. It's pretty much as it was. Currents start flowing. Okay, so this is probably pretty accurate, honestly. Now that I've thought about it. Papua New Guinea, though, is definitely not up here. So maybe not. Not that accurate. Not that accurate. Papua New Guinea, not there. Let's see if they have it more generally accurate here. Maybe. If that's Papua New Guinea. Okay. But my thoughts are, when it reaches here, it's not enough to cause the Earth to expand, but it may be enough to like quickly ripple through here and effectively time sequentially be hard to determine at first glance which one, although maybe these are tied to extinction events, like when the fracture reached here energetically was around a certain extinction. 1, 2, 3, 4, Cretaceous 5, maybe. Because essentially that's when the rapid phase of the Earth expansion process began, was at the Cretaceous boundary. And so this one, like physically, it's so much of a nova center that it has a gap in the middle where current just filled in, just came on in, was like, hello, and just filled the space here. I think it's where this fracture is, pretty much. Although I'm not, that might be this that they draw there. It's saying this is the youngest. And that this is just generally 1. So maybe this is not. Not the same type of thing. And this is just, I don't know. Because I'm kind of thinking maybe there's cross currents here coming across this way. That's kind of what I was getting at earlier. When I first started, was what I wanted to get at least, was that this current is coming this way against the current physically opposing. And as we go down here it begins to go across it more. And then down here, it really is about the boundary of that current flowing here. So then it crosses this boundary, and suddenly it's past the cross current, kind of like going downhill. And it then causes this one. But over here, like the current is kind of more in line with it. Any current coming from generally across this way that's like, it's just more and more gonna be going like down. Although South America was turned substantially, so what down is not the same really as it was. So I'm kind of wondering if as it approaches this over here, it begins to approach the directionally, like it's still coming, it probably is propagating this way. And it just, like this right here is tied to the fact that the earth like physically grew. So like this, maybe physically rotated. Is there like a evidence of a rotation around here? There's certainly a string of like nova centers that continue down this way, where there's these like little flame features. Not as much over here or over here really. There's that, but certainly stuff going on over there. But there seems to be a general propagation this way of like flame-like features. Here's that current though. So down here there's a main current that's just wide bulk flow going into into Australia for sure, so it must be going upward. It's got to be going to a degree from east to west through South America, at the base here at least, and then like this is the boundary probably, where there's a current flowing generally east to west. And then there's just a boundary. Okay, this boundary then, if we were to continue it over here, is actually over there. Okay, so that boundary is actually there, which then is actually then part of the boundary that cuts through the earth pretty much. That just flows this way. So there's kind of like an ammonite or a shallogram type thing that flows this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, this way, wraps around here and around, and then flows out that, back out that way. I forgot what I was referring to, fuck. So yeah, maybe it's essentially there's a cross current coming this way and into the base of Australia. over here, generally speaking. And so as the current's flowing through this region, it's actually more in line with the current, but up until it reaches resistance, which is probably why, if we go back to this again, it's like a current cutting across this general region and just producing a boundary where this current then struggles to get through it. The subtle one that's flowing opposing current that then can't really get through it, and the current over here is just flowing this way pretty much right across into the tip of Australia there, but running into this other current. And the current coming through North America, which then punctured the mantle, which fans out here, producing a boundary that generally cuts across here to Dwarka. So there might be some issues with this map, but certainly Australia appeared to be a little misaligned, so maybe there's some issues here, but because it just doesn't look very straight, but it may also be like dependent on when it occurred. So the current generally, though, flows across there to here. So this is almost like the boundary where above here there's a current going this way, and below the current is going generally westward then. And that's why there's kind of like a nucleus here that's got like a current circling it. Which probably then is why there's like a boundary up this way, because the current circling it is kind of caused to go up that way at times and just cut across the cross current and just hug the wall, produce a more defined boundary up this way. And same, like as it's rotating, it goes up this way, but the cross current and this cross current. But then, let me just get to what I wanted to say, for the love of God. Is that, like, this basically led into a nova down here that then led into the rapid Earth expansion phase, separating these, but then kind of, like, generally speaking, like, at that point, it was broken through this region, but it really was still not broken through here. So this began to nova and produce ripples in this region, which then especially propagated through this direction into between Antarctica and Australia, and like especially produced like this stretch here, right here, like once the Earth, there's ripples in here. Once the Earth like reached a certain expansion, it kind of, maybe this is like the big one. This one is maybe highly tied to this region and how it's like very defined. And then maybe this one and the ripples afterwards are tied to like a reduction in energy, like over here. Like these are maybe like centers of like sort of destabilizations. Although it may just be cross currents that are just causing this, but I'm not, because it kind of looks more like that. But in essence, generally like reducing the magnitude of the event so that it's not having to occur so spaced out, because these are getting more spaced out, but then the magnitude of them begin to reduce, and then they just kind of form a crack. But then I believe, like, because the Pacific was formed pretty well, then the ripple really started to get energy in this way. Let's see, when did the Indian Ocean form? Largely, like, all of this was pretty much after that, so that makes sense. There was some stuff early on just kind of opening between Madagascar and Africa. So essentially, the Africa had that swirl around it was kind of broke off a chunk of Madagascar, broke off, and even went downward. Like the swirl, like there's a swirl of energy around that nucleus, generally up and over, and generally down and over to the other side, but a swirl that kind of brought that like that, maybe. And then the Earth expanded, which is then when all this other stuff filled in. So there's pretty much none of this fractured yet. Like, this is all still together, still pretty much adjacent. This had been opened up a bit. This was open. This was all the blue and anything not red or orange, pretty much, and a little yellow was formed. So pretty much all of this formed after the Earth's rapid expansion phase. All of here, almost the entirety of the Indian Ocean, except for just where the currents were like pushing against the continents and just forming stable platforms that the continents were sort of like within the boundaries of, because they were forming platforms beneath them. Not on top of them, also on top of them, but mostly beneath them as like a sub-layer for the continents to rest on. But then as the platforms got bigger and bigger, they literally spaced the overlying continents. So mostly it was just fractured, but not even fractured probably. It really probably did take this current coming down here and splitting. Is that like here? I don't know where that split is. They draw a split, but it's not visible. Maybe here is this portion. Way less detectable. But this one, so this current continues through here. It definitely continued through here and just continued, providing a counter current. Continued through, and was spacing the current. The basalt, the oceanic crust was getting spaced. It's probably meeting in a relatively perpendicular way to just send these ripples out and perpendicular to the current. Does that kind of happen up here at all? This is going with it, so maybe it's going not. Yeah, this is up there is counter. Down here maybe perpendicular. Like the current is generally flowing down to a degree, downward. And maybe that even suggestive of which direction the current is rotating. Like as these things kind of turn. And then over here, the current was actually flowing like sideways, legitimately. Maybe. Although this doesn't seem to turn. I don't know. But I'm thinking that this generally fractured. Let's see here. Yeah, this generally occurred by this current coming down through here, across here, through here this way, where it then met itself across this way, through here, and then fed up this way, through here, where it essentially just filled the rest of the space by resistances, brought it down this way. Like the general trend was down like this again, rotating clockwise. So as this current went up through and into it, it kind of fed into that clockwise current, which then just kind of went down with it and rippled, producing the East African Rift. So that's where that current originates for the East African Rift. Which kind of makes sense then is, so after rapid phase of expansion, the current really was able to reach there. And then generally forming afterwards. So generally, this probably, when it got down there, enabled the shallogram to like really open down here. And then in so doing, it pretty much just sent a current like through this way. Even though this current's carving this way, maybe it, like, once the Earth starts to expand, it also kind of propagates back this way too. Because I'm not completely sure that I agree with what they draw here. I think it's more so just because we see this one, and I'm not sure what the basis is. There might be some degree of basis, and okay. I guess it's just got it just got hidden because it was too subtle. It was just too subtle. Essentially, it branched off because it's a branching off current this way, where this is like still the main current. A branching off current started to thread through here. Okay, now we can see it. There it is. There it is. Okay, I see it now. There it is. Oh, right there. Okay, that's where it branched off from. Right there. Okay, then we can see it there then. Oh, there it is. There it is. And it really is. So it's branching off back here even. It branches off here, really indicating that this is starting to spread the Earth open, because generally the overall current continues to propagate that direction. But this, like, detectable one, oh, where's that? That goes right here. So that's even coming from along the very boundary. So the very boundary current, the most potent one, branches off. The less ones continue on in the direction they were going, but the one with the most energy branches off, and it's just this fine thread of energy that generally is going over this way, away from it, and causing a spreading. And then again, the like overall energy propagation generally is here, but it interacts with the spreading still. Then over here it starts to really get through. Jump back oddly. It's kind of odd that it jumps back. Although it's right after this, which is maybe related to like a bump, like a divot. from some like subtle current coming out that just was enough to make some feature there, if that is real. I've always just kind of thought they weren't real, but maybe it's just legitimately real. Because it looks like it interacts with that and isn't just kind of there. Anyway, goes back here, goes over. It generally keeps going this way, though. Keeps going this way, just keeps going this way. So that really does strongly encourage that that probably was a interactive stream of some sort and not just some feature. That these things are all interactive streams then, that are just subtle but detectable. Generally gets through here, but real subtly, so it's just threading through here until it reaches this region. Although I don't see it. It's not visible on the Google Maps, but it's certainly visible here. This region where it vibrates after. To me, this is exactly the position that it like was able to finally break through the resistance of the Earth, and that's why it wiggles. Like it starts to ripple because it just broke through. Like holy shit, I got through. Starts to create ripples, and then it stabilizes more. Gets over here. Where it just continues. I mean, it's not completely without resistance. Whatever went out in there. What the? This whole. What? Just a bunch of those, like. Really straight current with straight lines across things. That almost look like man-made. But are just currents. Crazy. Presumably. And then it meets with its, like, the current that it broke off from. The portion of the main current broke off this way. And continued through, like, here. To just continue down this way. Creating this wider, more detectable one. Where the subtle side current went that way. And they met here. I mean, maybe it's possible that it kind of created space, and when they met here, that there was a rapid phase of expansion, or even it had to get all the way back to really here to finally enable it. But it probably was going on at somewhere in the middle of this, like possibly there. I don't know. Possibly here. Possibly here. Possibly here, possibly here. I mean, all of them are probably steps in the process where all of them are participating, but there's like the 66 million one is maybe here. Maybe here. I don't know. I don't know. Okay, I think we've made some more progress. And I'll stop there. See y'all soon. Peace out.